Hi everyone. Now, I love it when coincidences happen, and just recently I've been seeing quite a lot of people on their movie YouTube channels picking up the Ealing Studios classic Kind Hearts and Coronets that's just been recently released by Studio Canal on a 4K edition in their Vintage Classics editions. But coincidentally, I've just recently come across a film directed by Robert Hamer that I hadn't seen before or even heard of before, and I absolutely loved it and went straight to eBay and bought a copy. So I just thought I'd do this as a bit of a mini tribute to director Robert Hamer, a director who died tragically too early, and hopefully this will be of interest, and maybe it'll encourage you to seek out more of his films if you're only familiar with Kind Hearts and Coronets. So as I say, Robert Hamer, quite a tragic director really, only really about a dozen films to his credit, and he died far too early at the age of 52 from pneumonia in 1963. He had had struggles during his lifetime, being a closeted homosexual, and he also had quite severe alcoholism, which ultimately led him to have hallucinations. He had to be removed, unfortunately, from his final film, School for Scoundrels, in 1960, and that was finished by the producer Hal Chester and also Cyril Frankel. And then he unfortunately succumbed to pneumonia in 1963. But let's just go back a little bit. So, yeah, he started, as I understand it, with a little bit of work on the GPO film unit. So the GPO film unit is the General Post Office film unit that was in the UK. And they would do a lot of sort of propaganda type films or educational films, social service type films. I've actually got a couple of these BFI box sets, which cover a lot of these documentaries that they did. Really fantastic stuff all during the wartime and that kind of era. So yeah, a lot of public service documentaries, but a lot of British film directors cut their teeth on these kinds of films, including Albert Cavalcanti, the director of the great Went the Day Well, which is absolutely superb film. And Robert Hamer actually did a little bit of work with Cavalcanti in the GPO film unit, one of the films being Masters of the Sea in 1940, about the Navy. And he also acted as an editor on 3 of Charles Laughton's films, one of which included Jamaica Inn, which was directed by none other than Alfred Hitchcock. So his first film as a director, but not as the sole director, was on this one, Dead of Night in 1945, a real classic of British cinema, a portmanteau of kind of horror tales, if you like. But yeah, we've got 4 directors involved here. So as well as Robert Hamer, there is Alberto Cavalcanti, who he had worked with before, Charles Crichton, whose one of his last films was A Fish Called Wanda, and the great Basil Dearden as well, who's quite thoroughly represented in the Criterion collection. Now with Dead of Night, this was Robert Hamer's first working with the great British actress Googie Withers in a section in the film that was involving a haunted mirror. And in 1945 he did get to work with Googie Withers again in a Victorian melodrama that's set in Brighton, and this was called Pink String and Sealing Wax. This is a film that you can also get through the Studio Canal Vintage Classics series. But really with Googie Withers, the most significant film, and perhaps one of the more famous films in his career, is this one, It Always Rains on Sunday. This is a Kino Lorber release. Really, really terrific film this. Googie Withers in this film playing a woman who comes across her escaped convict boyfriend and gives him refuge, but this is in the sort of East End of London, and there's lots of different household dramas that are going on. This film really kind of paved the way for series such as EastEnders later on British TV, with all these kinds of little schemings and dramas and market issues and things like that going on. But yeah, fascinating one, this, really, really worth seeing. And the cinematography on this one is by the great Douglas Slocum, who went on to do films such as the Indiana Jones trilogy. So in 1949, that's when Robert Hamer really made his mark with the classic Ealing Studio film, Kind Hearts and Coronets. So whilst I don't have the Studio Canal 4K edition, here's my free newspaper edition that I got back in the 1990s from the Daily Mail newspaper, and you can see Alec Guinness there on the cover in one of his 8 roles. And there's just the back for you. But yeah, really, really fantastic black comedy. I won't say too much about this one because obviously this is the one that's being talked about the most at the moment. But yeah, terrific black comedy. Yes, it's great for Alec Guinness being in 8 roles, but really Dennis Price in the lead role, he is absolutely fantastic. Dennis Price had a lot of character roles really, so not always the lead role, but he's absolutely fantastic in this, as is the great Joan Greenwood as well, a woman who had such a purring, soft voice. She was just absolutely terrific and really, really good in this. So yes, Kind Hearts and Coronets, obviously a key work in Robert Hamer's career. But sticking with 1949, I mean, that was the year in which Kind Hearts and Coronets really made its mark. But there's another film that Robert Hamer did in 1949, and that one's got overshadowed, and it's a real shame. It doesn't have a Blu-ray release or anything like that. Let's hope it gets one, because the print that's currently available isn't too great. But the film is called The Spider and the Fly, and it stars Guy Rolfe, Eric Portman, and Nadia Gray. Really, really terrific film this. I absolutely loved it. Guy Rolfe, perhaps people might know him. He's a very tall, thin actor. He has been in films such as the HAMER war movie Yesterday's Enemy with Stanley Baker. Terrific film. I came to know him when I was doing my research on the filmography of John Gilliman, because he was in a film called Operation Diplomat. Horror movie fans amongst you might know him. So for instance, if you have that Arrow video box set of Into the Video Store, he's in the movie Dolls, and he's also in 3 of the Puppet Master movies, 3, 4 and 5 as the character Toulon. But yeah, I think Guy Rolfe is absolutely terrific in this film. Best performance I've seen him in. And this movie is kind of like a Heat movie for the 40s, because Guy Rolfe is a thief. We've got Eric Portman as a police officer. He's wanting to capture Guy Rolfe in the act and not getting to do so. They both have a sort of begrudging respect for each other. And then there's a woman involved, Nadia Gray, who's an accomplice to Guy Rolfe's character and an alibi for him. So she's quite close with him, but she's also starts developing a relationship with Eric Portman's police officer as well. So we've got this really, really interesting dynamic as things play out. Now, this film was criticised perhaps for being a bit slow and not enough tension. I think that's rubbish. I think it's a really, really exciting film, and it takes a really interesting direction. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah, like I say, this one doesn't have a Blu-ray release at the moment, so the available print is not too great. But yeah, I really, really hope this one will get a restoration because it thoroughly deserves it. Now, I should say that in this film, the woman who comes between Guy Rolfe and Eric Portman is played by Nadia Gray, a Romanian actress who was in films such as Fellini's La Dolce Vita, but yeah, she had quite a varied career, and in fact, if anybody has the Indicator release of Maniac, a film in which she co-starred in, this has a nice special feature on the back in which a lady, Lindsay Ann Hallam, does a nice little featurette giving the career of Nadia Gray. So really worth watching that featurette. But actually, that isn't the film that I was intending to talk about, because the discovery that I made just recently, if you like, was this 1953 film from director Robert Hamer, and it's called The Long Memory, and it stars the great John Mills. Wow, wow, wow. I absolutely love this. So this is a drama. It's not a comedy, it's a drama, and a crime drama, and quite a tough one as well. So again, this was a film that kind of got criticised a bit. People didn't think that John Mills was quite right for this role, but I loved it. John Mills here is pissed off. He's angry. He's a guy that has been imprisoned for a crime he did not commit, and when he gets out, he wants to track down the people that falsely imprisoned him and get his revenge. So yeah, John Mills, yeah, a guy that's been in loads and loads of films. For sure, he's played sort of tough roles, but there's always been a kind of kindness to his character, I suppose, in most of those films. Here, he's pissed off and he wants his revenge. This film really kind of foreshadows, if you like, something like Get Carter from 1971. I'm not going to put any plot spoilers in here, but there are a couple of scenes in this that I think will make you think of Get Carter. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what happened for me. The other thing I love about this film is the use of the locations in this. Robert Hamer really uses the locations well for dramatic effect. So, for instance, when John Mills' character comes out of prison, he goes and stays on a barge that's on the sort of Thames estuary, and you've got this sort of muddy estuary environment that's around him. He goes to London. We've got Waterloo Station. We've got Shad Thames, which is absolutely one of my favourite areas of London, and it's a working part of London at that time when this was made. So nowadays it's just fancy apartments there and restaurants, but yeah, you get to see the working Shad Thames in this film, so that's terrific as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, I really love this. Cinematography on this one is by the great Harry Waxman, who did films such as Brighton Rock, Swiss Family Robinson, The Wicker Man, and The Day the Earth Caught Fire. So yeah, it looks great. It's a really taut kind of film. Yes, it's got its weaknesses, I suppose, because some of the plot elements are a little bit shaky at times. The involvement of the police in this one is a bit woolly. The police don't really achieve much in this film, but no, it's a great drama. And it's also the only role for a Norwegian actress called Eva Berg, who plays an immigrant in this, who falls for John Mills' character and tries to see if she can sort of calm him down and establish a relationship with him. Really interesting kind of role. But yeah, the only British film that she did. Her few other films were Norwegian. But yeah, just take a look at the back again. John Mills is not happy. So yeah, I absolutely love this film. I think it's absolutely terrific. So yeah, this was a DVD edition I've got. I don't think that it's available on Blu-ray, unfortunately. Again, this would be another one that would look fantastic in a Blu-ray edition or a 4K. But yeah, this DVD is certainly watchable. I loved it. So just skimming through some of the other films that Robert Hamer did. So definitely he had established a relationship with Alec Guinness during the making of Kind Hearts and Coronets, and they worked together on a few more films, perhaps one of the most significant being 1954's Father Brown, which also reunited Guinness with the lovely actress Joan Greenwood. This was a film that was based on stories by G.K. Chesterton. Then in 1955 worked with Guinness again on a film called To Paris with Love, and 1959 with Guinness once more on a film called The Scapegoat. And then finally we get to 1960, and this was the final film for director Robert Hamer, unfortunately. But I think he went out on a high note, and it is the film School for Scoundrels, which I have on this wonderful Terry Thomas collection. Terry Thomas really sums it up on this picture here. Terry Thomas being a real cad. And that's exactly what he is in School for Scoundrels. This is a hilarious film. He's really entertaining in it. So the cast in this one includes Ian Carmichael, Terry Thomas, Alistair Sim, and Jeanette Scott. Jeanette Scott, yeah, lovely actress. She was in films that included The Day of the Triffids from 1963 and a Hammer movie, Paranoiac, with Oliver Reed. But School for Scoundrels, really fun story, this one. Ian Carmichael is a very sort of meek kind of guy who meets Jeanette Scott, manages to go on a date with her, but they soon get interrupted by the cad, who is Terry Thomas, and he whisks her away, and Ian Carmichael has to foot the bill at a restaurant and just is quite forlorn. But he heads off for a school which will educate him in one-upmanship, and this is chaired by Alistair Sim. So really fun stuff as Alistair Sim educates him to gain his confidence and learn various tricks and tools that will enable him to have one-upmanship over Terry Thomas and win the girl back. Hugely fun stuff, and some great sight gags. Dennis Price, who was in Kind Hearts and Coronets as the lead actor in that, he has a small role in this one as a car salesman. You know, very different type of role, but very funny. So yeah, a lot of entertainment in this one. Really did make me laugh. Absolutely love it. Both Ian Carmichael and Terry Thomas had actually worked together just the previous year in the Peter Sellers film I'm All Right, Jack, for the Bolting brothers. But the unfortunate thing with the film is that Robert Hamer at this stage was very drunk, apparently, on set quite a lot, and he couldn't actually finish the film. So the producer, Hal Chester, had to step in, as did director Cyril Frankel. So Hal Chester, as well as being producer on this film, he'd been a producer on classic movies such as Jacques Tourneur's Night of the Demon, and Cyril Frankel, a fairly established director, and in fact he did this great one for Hammer Studios, which is Never Take Sweets from a Stranger. Now, as with Ealing Studio classic The Lady Killers, American filmmakers decided that they wanted to remake this one, so The Lady Killers got remade by the Coen brothers. Really disastrous movie, I think, starring Tom Hanks. And similarly, Todd Phillips, director of Joker, decided to remake this one in 2006 with Billy Bob Thornton and John Heder, star of Napoleon Dynamite. I haven't seen that version, but I cannot imagine it's anywhere near as funny as watching Ian Carmichael and Terry Thomas. Terry Thomas, particularly in this, is just sensational. Okay, so that's just my brief tribute to Robert Hamer. I just felt like doing that as I picked up the long memory, and I've watched The Spider and The Fly, and then seeing people out there as well picking up that wonderful 4K edition of Kind Hearts and Coronets. So yeah, enjoy that movie especially. It is fantastic, but hopefully if you're not familiar with any other films from Robert Hamer, you'll look them up. And if you are familiar already with those films, and maybe even some of the films that I haven't talked about, let me know in the comments. Let me know which are your favourites. Okay, thanks very much for joining me on this one. Hope to see you again. All the best. Bye-bye.